Today we're going to take a look at how to mix more dynamic color or mix color that looks more alive or has more vibrancy to it. We want to mix color that suggests the type of light that we're looking at, whether it's cloudy day, sunny day, night scene. There's always a type of light there, and we want to be able to mix colors that suggest that. So we're looking at kind of two stages of mixing color. The first stage would be more the local color stage, the big value, big shape of color that best represents what the light's doing. Then the second stage would be more broken color stage. That's where we add colors to that initial color, that local color, that maybe creates more vibration. It might mute the color, it might make it stronger, um, create more color variation. But those two stages, I think, go together to create a more dynamic color look to your painting. So, what we're going to look at first here, step by step of a painting I did in Leapers Fork, Tennessee. Great place to paint, by the way. This was a farm there, had a nice creek running through it. Just early in the morning, so I want to paint and suggest what the light is doing. And most of the time, when we're mixing color to suggest the light, that means mixing colors that maybe don't match exactly what's there. Because if I try and, especially if I'm working from a photograph, if I try and match this bright sunlight, yellow green here, and I stare right at that area and I mix until I think I match it, it's not going to work. It's going to be dead looking. It's going to be too dark because I'm isolating this area. Even if I'm outside doing the same thing, if I'm looking right in there, it's going to get more and more muted. It's going to get darker. But if I stare at the shadow area here and look at the real light white painted barn, then that's going to give me a better idea of what color and value the yellow green grass is. So the key, I think, to finding that initial color, that block in color, the key is to compare the value of the different shapes. And you're thinking, well, we're talking about color here. We're not talking about value. But color is 80% value. If I can get the value right, that right value that compares favorably to the other values, that it ties in and compares to the other values, then I'm going to get the suggestion of light. Now, picking a color, I want to pick a color that's, in this case, more vibrant in here, that has a lot of warmth to it, that's really going to suggest the sunlight. Same thing in here, I'm going to go with a darker color compared to the light, or even compared to the sky. Compare it to two or three different big shapes. But don't just stare at one area and mix until you think you've matched it, because you're going to come up with a dead color. So that's kind of the start. So let's go to the step by step, starting with the first step here, which is the drawing stage. And of course, we're talking about color, but getting the right drawing down is going to help your color work better also. If I don't get a good composition, I don't get the drawing right, the proportions right, it's not going to work as well. So I'm toning with a burnt sienna and a little bit of blue, I think. And I'm just blocking in big shapes. I'm not trying to render detail, no color, everything's just, I'm trying to think in terms of three values of burnt sienna. So I'm making three values here, and I have all three already. I've got the half tone, the middle value, it's the initial tone on the canvas. Then here's the darker tone, shadows, and then I wipe out for the lightest. And those are the three values I want to use. Next stage, still the drawing here, and I still have the three values: the light of the barn, pretty much the light of the creek, and then the darker shadows, and then kind of the halftone. And I'm not worried about separating the planes, the sky plane, the flat plane, the vertical plane, and the slanted plane. All I want to do is find that dark shadow pattern, the light pattern, and then where the halftones go. Just three values. And that will make color so much easier. So stick with this stage as long as you have to, but don't add any detail because you're just going to cover it up anyway. Now I'm starting to add color, and this is the block-in color stage. Trying to go pretty much for just one color that best represents, in this case, the shadow here, and the shadow back in here, and the real dark in there, and then the darks on the tree. And I want a color that is cool, but again, is the right value compared to, as you can see down here in the photograph, compared to the light area. And that's a real key in coming up with the right color value, is to compare it. In this case, compare the darks with the lights so that I get the right relationship. It does not help just to match the color. It just doesn't work. So, and I'm also pushing the color a little stronger. This is probably ultramarine blue, a little bit of Viridian, ultramarine blue, and probably a touch of orange, and or yellow ochre. Yellow ochre turns the blues a little bit on the green side, and then the orange kind of mutes it slightly. Could have used a burnt sienna to mute it slightly. And then this is just same color but darker, because the upright tree here is going to be darker than the flat shadow. And I'm comparing value or darks with darks. So this dark, which is upright, is going to be a different value than this dark, which is vertical. Now I've already added some color. I've added a little bit more bluer color, just ultramarine, getting it the right value. And again, value means how dark or light it is, and scrubbing it around. I don't necessarily see it in the photograph. I did a color study there, and then I painted from that in the photograph at home in the studio. But what I want is just color variation. So here I've added some of the second stage, a little bit of red there, the blue, some violet. And it's not that I'm seeing these colors in the photograph. I might see them. Sometimes I can see more color in the reference, but most of the time not. The photograph doesn't pick it up. But I just want some color change, as long as that color is the same value as I started with. So generally I add that broken color after everything is blocked in, but sometimes I don't. I'll start chopping it in right away. I went ahead and kind of working in the foreground and the tree back in here and the background hill, added some lights. And again, my initial color when I look at this is this yellow green right there. That's the important color. Now I also, as I mixed in it, chopped in some orange, a little bit of red violet, and then the yellow green. So I got three colors going in there. But if it helps, start with just that one color that best represents the light. And in this case, it would be the yellow green. And I used cad yellow light, ultramarine blue, and maybe a little Viridian, tiny bit of Viridian. Viridian is a very strong, unnatural looking green, so a tiny bit of it goes a long way. And my Viridian is a Viridian hue, so it's really just phthalo green. But a tiny bit of it punches that color a little bit. Too much of it and it'll look real garish. It won't work. And I added the shadows in the barn. And when I look at this, I just want a dark, somewhat cool. Shadows or the absence of sunlight is generally cooler. But there's a lot of warmth bouncing in here from the sunlight down here, and then the yellow-orange hay. That color's just bouncing around in the shadows. So this is burnt sienna in blue, maybe a little bit of alizarin crimson for inside. But the big thing about the shadow in here is the value. It has to be a dark. I mean, I could make it more violet, and that would work because it would read as shadow, and as long as I get it the right value. But I chose a blue and burnt sienna and a little bit of alizarin. And forcing the background hill, I want it to stay way in the background. You can see the hill here. It's almost as green as the grass up front. But if I make it that green, it's going to flatten the painting. I need to create depth, distance back there. So a lot of blue, you can see right here, a little bit of ochre. Cad yellow would make it too strong. So a little bit of ochre, ultramarine blue, and a lot of white compared to this. Background has to have more white in it. And then I added a little bit of violet, this dioxazine purple with white, getting it the same value and just dragging it in there. I do have a few dark accents of shadow, um, just to show some form back in there. And a dark and light green in the tree as well. Now I'm filling in the rest of the tree, and I want some color variation. If my colors, this is summertime, you can see the greens here pretty much the same everywhere. The greens in the trees, the greens in the grass, they're different greens, but not much variation between the two. So I push this tree, and I do see that a little bit. I don't know if you can see this photograph close up, but I'm taking advantage of a little bit of yellow orange right there. This is in August, so it's not fall color. I think it's just dried out leaves, which, work pretty nice, the dried out leaves part. And that gives me some variation. So this has more viridian in it and ochre with a little bit of burnt sienna to gray it. This is cad yellow and ultramarine blue, little bit of burnt sienna, and then this is yellow orange. Probably nothing in it, just to get it filled in there. And that gives me that variation of green, so they all look the same. And then my yellow green on the grass looks different also. So trying to vary those greens, and then the greens in the background look different as well. Added the sky, and I have two values of sky here. And the color on the lower part of the sky, which is always lighter, is white and phthalo blue. It's a bit warmer. The sky gets a little warmer as it recedes back into the distance. It gets a little cooler and darker as it goes up towards the top, towards the zenith. So I want to use more phthalo blue down here and ultramarine up there. Then I blended them slightly, and then I broke up the color, added a little bit of color to make it vibrate, some alizarin crimson. And I get that color the same value. That's what I did down in the grass with the orange and the violet. That's what I did inside the shadows. I added color and made it the same value as that local color, because I don't want a value change. That would be a bunch of detail. So get your color changes within that big value area the same value, that big shape. Otherwise, it's going to be just tons of detail, and it's going to kill your painting. The bigger and more simple the values, the easier it is to read your painting. Now I've added the water. And the water is pretty much going to be either the reflection of what's above it, or it's going to be you're looking through the water to what's below it. And here at the angle I was, and where the light was coming from, it's just reflecting what's above it. So here's the sky, trees here. These were rocks in here, which I will hopefully make more rock-like in a minute. But I wanted a big mass and shape. So again, ultramarine blue, phthalo blue, and white. I wanted it a little bit darker than the sky, because it is a reflection. It's not the real thing, so it can't be the exact same value. That would also flatten the painting. And then the reflection of the yellow green and the green and the yellow orange, I kind of blended them together, made them slightly darker, and put in for the reflection down there. And I see the rocks, which are in shadow, I see the rocks as a violet. Now you could look at them and say, oh, it's just gray, and reach for black and white, but that's going to be a dead color. So I went for a color, and that would be violet. And the violet here is dioxazine purple, which by itself was too strong, this dioxazine purple. And then I added a little bit of orange to it. So that muted it slightly. And this gives me the block-in color of those rocks. I can come back later and add some darks and some lights. But that's the block-in color. By the way, this violet, it is dioxazine purple and white, but I buy it in a tube from Daler-Rowney. It's called Violet Gray. And just comes in handy. I like having the violet lighter because I use it to tone down yellows and yellow oranges, lighter warm colors. So having it lighter right from the tube is just a convenience. Now, got some rocks here I have not filled in yet, so those aren't color mixes there. They're just the bare canvas still. Now I am starting to break up the color a bit more. I'm adding some more blue-green, ultramarine blue, a little bit of Viridian in here, and just chopping it in. It's slightly lighter than what was there, so it is a value change, but it just breaks it up a little bit. A little more Viridian here, a little bit of red there. Added some dappled lighting of the yellow-green here, and then the yellow, green, and orange. So I'm always thinking in terms of identifiable color. I don't want to mix and mix until I think I match a photograph, because the color's not very good. So identify a color, and usually a color from the color wheel: yellow, orange, yellow, green, or red, violet, or red, blue, blue, green. There's 12 colors on the color wheel. Force what you're looking at into one of those colors. Then make it the right value, adjust the intensity, and it should work. I'm making it sound real easy, but the thought process is easy. I blocked in the barn, and you can see the colors here. And I started with just white and yellow ochre right here. And then I added just color for color's sake, because just one flat color, even though it's all the same value, just one flat color is dead looking. So I added a touch of white and Viridian right there. I just covered it up. This is white and violet right there. And it's all the same value. So all these colors, the green, the violet, the white, and yellow ochre, they're all 98% white. And as long as I keep them all the same value, I can have a ton of color in there. And it just makes the area, this wall, vibrate and look a lot better. Could just paint it one flat color, but again, it would be kind of dead. It'd be a little lifeless. This punches it up. Same thing up in here. You can see the color, the violet here I have on the blue-green hill. Blue-green here, some violet I scrubbed in. It just varies the color, but it has to be the same value as that initial green I put down. Here I'm starting to break up, getting thicker with this paint also. The thicker yellow-green here, and then just darker green. And this is the idea of the block-in. Usually do the whole painting like this tree right here, because I have pretty much one color for the yellow-green, probably cad yellow light, ultramarine blue. And here it's ultramarine blue, a little bit of cad yellow light, maybe a touch of burnt sienna, but not much. I don't want to gray it too much. And that gives me my light yellow green and my dark green. Then I got a middle value, just a little bit darker than the light. So I have 3 values in that tree, and that's the block-in color. Now I can come in with some yellow orange, chop around in here, maybe a little bit of blue violet in the shadow. As long as it's the same value, it'll really punch up the color, make it look a lot more dynamic. And I'm doing that over in here. I'm using more of a choppier brush stroke as well in here. Short, choppy brush strokes, just to vary the brush strokes in the tree so they're not all the same. I got some orange in the green tree, some violet, white and yellow ochre in the sunlit tree trunk, and a little violet with a touch of yellow ochre in the shadow. Same thing with these tree trunks. Still real simple, just one color, 2 values. I haven't broken them up like I have broken up the grass here, the grass in the shadow, the grass on the barn. And in here too, you can see a lot of color change. The red, a little bit of blue, darker blue, red violet. Just trying to change up the color slightly. And this is the finished painting. So let me zoom in a bit. So you can see kind of the broken color in the water. I've got ultramarine blue with a little bit of alizarin right in here. And then this is phthalo blue. You can see the difference, the two blues. This one's a little warmer, a little more vibrant, a little bit more unnatural looking. Ultramarine blue has a tiny bit of red in it from the tube. So it's a bit more of a blue violet. Plus I have a little bit of alizarin in it anyway. You can see what I did to the rocks here. I got three values. I got the overall kind of half tone, the light, and then some dark accents in there. And those three values make it read a lot better. And same thing over in here. These two values, the yellow green, and then just probably started with this green and blocked that area in. Then added some darker accents in the shadow, a little bit of color change in the green. It's a bit more ochre instead of cad yellow light. You can see the red here in the sky sticking out. Sticks out because the color didn't quite blend in very much there, and I kind of like it sticking out. Most of this red blends into the blue sky, but some of it doesn't. It's kind of accidental, but I like it. It gives me a little more color variation in the sky. So think about color variation to make your colors a little more vibrant, a little more alive. The important thing is the initial block-in color, getting the values right and the big overall color, and then break it up. I have some paintings here to look at, and you can see how some of these artists did somewhat the same thing, maybe a bit better than me. This is Alfred Sisley, French impressionist, even though he was English. Look at his brushwork. Of course, he worked totally outside. Very dynamic, very thick paint. Now, he uses small brush strokes. See the tiny brush strokes in here. But he gets away with that because even though he's using tiny brush strokes, these shapes hold together as big, solid masses. He doesn't add tiny brush strokes and get too many value changes. Same thing with the water. A lot of brush strokes, but it still reads as dark reflection in the water and sky reflection in the water. So big, simple shapes, but within the shapes, he breaks it up with smaller brush strokes. A lot of detail in this grass, but it's still beautiful. And he was so good at capturing the atmosphere and the sense of light. You can tell it's later in the day or earlier in the morning. Sun isn't quite up enough yet, but enough sunlight in the sky and then the shadows on the buildings. Really nice contrast of warm and cool color. It's another Alfred. These are big files, so I can kind of zoom in on them a little bit. So again, he's got two values of blue in the background building, but he's got some other colors in there. Same thing with the trees, starting with the blue and then adding a warmer color. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just some kind of warmer color, whether it's a red violet or a red orange, maybe even a little bit of green in there that's slightly warm. And that pulls the trees ahead of the buildings. And then the nice brushwork up in here. And again, about three values in the water and two or three different colors. Three values of blue, and then chopping in, you can see a little orange in there, just lightly dragging that in with a real light touch, just to break up the color. Really nice shadows, buildings, bare trees against the sky. Just a warmer, grayer color against the kind of warm violet sky. Very nice. Now this is a painting by Karl Moll. He was a Austrian painter in the 1920s, 30s, 40s. He died in 45. But very vibrant color. Here he's using almost straight, looks to me, phthalo green. Some kind of really strong green. If it's not phthalo, it's Prussian green maybe. And it's really dynamic. against the cooler shadow. Both of these are in shadow. This is a little lighter, more green. This is darker because it's vertical trees, so it's going to be a different value. And it's a cooler, it's more of a blue-green. And then you have the really bright sunlit trees in there. And again, probably starting with one color, maybe this green right here, and then adding more yellow green, some oranges, some ochres, just scrubbing a lot of color in it, in that light area, all with that real light value, then adding some of these dark accents. And that really, really a great painting. And it's very simple. No detail to speak of, except the flowers. Just picked that one spot. It's beautiful painting. So another one of Carl Moll, and here he's really pushing color and being a little bit more interesting with the brushwork. But here he's really pushing shadows cooler, a lot of straight blue. I don't know what kind of blue that is. Manganese maybe, which I don't use. But very strong, along with the red violet, the kind of red oranges, the reds, greens, all in the shadow. And my guess is starting with a cooler blue, blue-violet, filling in the shadow area, and then getting thicker as you go, adding more blue, blue-violet, red-violet, red-orange. Same thing with a really strong, again, a Viridian or a Prussian green with cad yellow light, really strong, almost unnatural looking green. But it shows the vibrancy of the sunlight. So unless you push the color, especially on a really bright sunny day, if you don't push the color stronger than what you think, it's not going to work as well. It's going to be a little on the dead side. So mix color that best suggests the sunlight rather than just copying what's there. And I can do a better job of suggesting sunlight when I push the lights warmer, a little more intense. It doesn't mean I can't have some gray colors in there. I would want to chop in, like he has some reds in here, some muted color, maybe a blue and orange. Same value as the green, and just chopping it in there to get some muted color along with the intense color. And that combination of gray color and intense color really vibrates as well. Some more here. This is also Carl Moll. It's Carl Moll Day. Still life, very vibrant colors. Again, this is more of a muted blue. It looks like kind of manganese blue. Also, and then a darker, slightly muted manganese blue. Then coming in both those areas, there's some red, there's a little bit of yellow, some green, a lot of color in there. Looks like real thick paint. It's not palette knife, it's just brush. Same thing in the shadow, starting with the blue, then adding the green, some red there, just to break up the color. And when you first start doing that, when you first start breaking up the color, you put down your initial overall local color that best represents the value and temperature there. When you start adding color to it, it's going to be strange at first. You'll mess it up. You'll get the color too dark, too light. You'll get too much, not enough. But keep at it, because the more you do it, the easier it becomes, just like anything else. This is a painting by Carl Rungus. This was more for brushwork for another video, but pretty dynamic color. Looks like a burnt sienna with blue and a little yellow, ochre, and orange. More about dynamic brushwork there. A little Rungus thrown in free of charge. Also Carl Moll. Here he's using real short, choppy brush strokes. Mostly in shadow with just this strip of sunlight back in the background. Very effective. Nice color variation in the greens. Nice color change in the tree bark, the lighter tree trunks. Not a lot of color variation in the big shapes, but enough to make it interesting. And then the paint being very thick really helps. and is using that short, choppy brush stroke that Cicely used earlier. Last one here. This is Colin Campbell Cooper. He was American Impressionist, painted a lot in New York City. New York City street scenes, I think, is what he's known for, but he's also painted in California. This is Yosemite. And look at the variation of color. Now he has, first of all, the shadow shape here. All this is shadow shape. You lay that in first. You lay that shape in, then you got your lights, your sky. Maybe picking one color, that color to start with, but then laying in all the subtle variations that you see or don't see. You want to create variations just for the sake of creating variations so that you have some color variation in the painting. Really pushing the color cool in the shadows, really blue, and then a lot of warm, kind of muted, grayish warm, but very warm color in the sunlight. And there's also, to paint this way, to paint thicker, more vibrant color, you need to use thick paint. If you try and do it with thin paint, it's going to look kind of scratchy. Although I've seen it done really well with thin paint, it just has more effect when you're using thicker paint instead of thin. Don't hesitate to experiment and push the color and see what you can come up with.